and welcome to another episode of Grow For It. Today we have a very special guest, Bryan Partee, founder of Nonprofit Marketplace. Bryan has 20 years as a successful nonprofit CEO, and now he coaches others to do the same. Bryan, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always love talking about this stuff.
Absolutely. Happy to have you. Can you start out by walking us through your journey within the nonprofit space and how that led you into coaching?
Sure. Here's what I'm going to go way back, but follow me on this. I went to school. I was born and raised in San Diego. Went to school at UC San Diego. Graduated, and I was working with the NBA. I did some stuff with TNT, kind of things. And it's got a lot of not what you know, it's who you know. And I knew some people who got me in Major League Baseball and stuff like that. And I love sports, and but the fandom of being close to Michael Jordan wears off eventually, kind of thing. You have to pay bills like, normal people do. And you move a lot because you got to go to this team in Major League Baseball, then their season's over. And unless you're like to the level of, nationally, like Bob Costas, Howard Stern. I always say Howard Stern is a big nationally known person. Those kind of people. You move and you move and you move, and there's not a lot of stability in your life. So as a result, I left. I moved to East Texas, like a little dinky town called Marshall, 25,000 people. It's like almost Shreveport, Louisiana. I was a city commissioner there for a while. I worked with my dad. My dad was the reason why we lived in San Diego. He was a football player, but he got tired of San Diego, which he's just insane. That's all there is to say about that, because San Diego is awesome. It's a beautiful city. It's just so crazy expensive. And so we ended up, when I was a city commissioner, I didn't even know we had a boys and girls club. And one of the board members, who was also one of my political supporter people, he said, "Hey, we're looking for an executive director. Would you want to do it?" And I was like, I was a YMCA kid growing up, but I took the job, and I was there 15 years, and we had massive growth. We went from one site, 80 kids a day, about $225,000 budget, to about 1,400 kids a day, 26 sites, and a $2.5 million budget. Now, I don't say that to brag. It's not me, because I had a lot of people doing great work and stuff like that. Boys and Girls Club trains you really well, which I'll get into that part in just a minute. But when you're in a small rural town, a lot of times you see the mentality of people where they say, "Well, we've never done it that way before. We've always done it this way." And I don't know. I don't know if it's because I lived in California. I saw so much, San Diego's a big city. I've seen more stuff than what would happen in Marshall, Texas. Stuff like, I don't know what the reason was, but I'd bring out these ideas and they'd work. And so we grew a lot. And so I got really good at that, and raising money and writing grants and all those kind of things. But one of the other things, and where we get into the coaching, I'll get into the coaching in a second. Let me take one step back. My son has severe ADHD, and we basically needed a better school district for him, for his ADHD, of teachers that were good with working with neurodivergent kids and stuff like that. And our doctor recommended, he said, got to go to Prosper, which is in North Dallas. We live in McKinney now, but like, if you could see, Prosper's like 100 feet that way. We're like right next to Prosper. Anyway, we worked, we got him in at Prosper, and then I became the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Sherman, which is right by Oklahoma. And so that was my journey through nonprofit. And we had good success, really good success in Oklahoma. But my son is also very tall, and he plays basketball. And I started missing games, and Sherman is about 45 minutes to an hour away. And so I just got tired of missing. You only get to watch your son play basketball one time. And for any of you out there with kids, that it's important to cherish your time, because everybody says, "Oh, it grows up so fast." Yeah, whatever, grows up so fast. And then you realize, I'm in an empty house right now because my kid's in college. He's gone. So in that regard, my wife and I are like, well, we don't know what to do, that kind of thing. So, but going back to the coaching side of things, and I might be jumping a question for you, but I started to learn two of the things I learned is Boys and Girls Club did a really good job at preparing CEOs. They had a great training program. They would send people from the headquarters of Boys and Girls Club is in Atlanta. And they would send people from Atlanta to, they try to do cluster trainings and say, okay, we're going to be in Dallas. And so when we were in Marshall is about 2.5 hours away, we could drive up and do a training in Dallas, which is a whole lot cheaper than flying to Atlanta, and all that. Anyway, but they do really good. They're good on outcomes. They're good on understanding the situation, because when you're dealing with kids, you don't know what a kid's situation is. You don't know if they're getting abused at home. You don't know if they have a great life. You don't know if they have a brother that beats them up all the time. Whatever. You don't know, and so you really learn. And this is one of the key things I think in my coaching that I do well is listening. Everybody, I'm sure everybody in the world has said listening, but you gotta. And I don't mean listen just like going, okay. You digest what's being said. When you hear the kid talking things, you look for context clues about how they can say, look, we don't have enough food in the house because we're always really hungry. Or, oh, my mom didn't get home from work last night till 3 a.m. You look for those clues. Same thing when you're coaching people. And my focus, by the way, is mostly with nonprofit leaders. And I do a hybrid version of coaching and mentoring, because I want to, the way I look at it is coaching is helping you as an individual, whether or not you stay with that same company, you're getting skills to move on if you need to, if something changes in your life. Mentoring is helping you help your organization succeed. So techniques you can do for fundraising, techniques you can use for grant writing, techniques you can use for training and board development. So there are two different sides. And by the way, even it doesn't fall, I don't consider it is coaching, but I don't consider it coaching when I tell people for my services. One of the things I do is I travel a lot to do board development. In fact, I'm going to Northern California, end of January, I believe. And I'm facilitating a retreat. That's kind of the mentoring side of things, right? Because I'm going to tell them, here's what we did at our club that was successful. It should work for you. But also, I'm coaching the board members on how they should be. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, a board member is nothing more than a well-intentioned person. Hey, I want to be on the board of the Boys and Girls Club. I want to be on the board of the Humane Society because I love animals. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Some clubs, not just clubs, I should say. I always say clubs. It's my go-to. Some nonprofits, they don't even do an orientation. They're like, oh, we need diversity, so let's find a black guy and a Latino woman. And they don't talk to them about their mission. Or they say, oh, we need more people, so let's just ask the rich guy because he might be or she might be able to just donate money because we're low on money. But again, if they don't know the mission, that how good are they gonna be, regardless if they're black, white, male, female, old, young, whatever? They're not. So doing something like the board development is also, like I said, I consider it consulting, part of my consulting stuff, but it's coaching, because you're teaching these adults who want to do a good job. You're not going to waste your time to get on a board and go to a meeting once a month and then go to a retreat and do all this different and have to raise money and all this stuff that board members do, and then just not care to try to do a good job. If you didn't want to do it, just say no in the first place. And I think a lot of people would be like that. So they want to do a good job, but you gotta train them. You got to talk to them. You got to explain to them, the expectations and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of encapsulating everything of where I got there. And I said, I think my love for teaching, because coaching is just teaching. My love for doing this came from the stuff that, I thought I was on top of things, and real self-aware. But when I did some of the trainings when I went through, 20 years, you get a lot of training from Boys and Girls Club. I ended up, I realized that I was learning stuff, and I'm like, oh, what are these goofs going to teach me? Because I get it. And I saw that, so that's kind of the same way, the same approach I take is that again, you don't know everything. We know we don't know everything, but you know what I mean? You go and go, and what are these guys going to, what kind of stuff am I going to be sold in this coaching, kind of thing. But when you sit there and again, from my own experience, when I open my mind to it and go, you look at everything this way, the coach might look at things this way. And it gives you a whole new perspective and go, oh my gosh, that might work. I get it. So that's kind of what I try to do. I try to help the, people open their eyes, think a little bit differently, maybe throw out some suggestions to them, but let them try to find their way on it. So yeah, that's my main journey and where I got to and a lot of what I do.
So I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years being in the nonprofit space and now coaching other nonprofit leaders. How would you say that nonprofit coaching is different from coaching a for-profit business?
Okay. A lot of it, honestly, it's two different things, first of all. And I'm talking two different things within the nonprofit realm. First of all, the big clubs hire for professional people. They hire people with big, long resumes, with letters behind their name and PhDs and all these different things, right? And that's more like for profit. In my case, I'll tell you the truth, honest God truth. When you're small and you're rural, that's a whole different animal, because a lot of times you get the same people living in the same towns for generations of their family, and they don't want to move. And so when you're doing a nonprofit in a small town, taking the best that's available, because you know what? No PhD person from Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Miami, whatever, is going to go, wow, I really want to move to Marshall, Texas. You know what I mean? There's not, and I don't mean that as a diss on Marshall, Texas. I mean, if you're already established in a big city where there's more money, where there's more people, where there's more consistency, that's what you're getting. So when you're doing a Boys and Girls Club in a small town, or in any nonprofit, I should say, you're taking what you get, and you've got to form that person. Because I mentioned to you before we got on the air and stuff, well, I talked about a little about getting the job at the club. I had no experience in nonprofits, not an ounce. I didn't know. How do I write a board? I have to write the board meeting agenda? That's me. It's not the board president. I didn't do that. I don't have a problem talking to people, but I never raised any money. I never raised a dime. I've never gone to people, and since I'd left, I'd made asks of $500,000, $100,000 for this project, or $1 million for that project. So first of all, the first big difference is obviously the criteria. I still think if you're the CEO of the YMCA in Chicago, you're a businessman or woman. You're big time. So that, I think it's more depending upon the size and where you are, kind of thing. Because I can certainly tell you, if I lived in Dallas before I lived in Marshall, nobody's knocking on my door to make me the executive director and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Dallas. You know what I mean? Because they're pulling from a different pool of people. That's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of times that I find is coaching business people. The business people are really aggressive. Growth, money, money, money. That's how we're successful. Nonprofit, it's very different. You want growth and you want to get more money in, but it's really different because you're dealing with a whole different set of skills. I mean, if you're CEO of IBM, you're not going out soliciting money for a golf tournament. I mean, unless it's like, for your kid or something like that. You know what I mean? You're not doing it's a different skill base. So one of the things I teach my people when I talk, especially with nonprofits, is coming from a position of a strength-based position. A lot of nonprofits get the whole, well, it would help us if you could donate just anything that you got. We appreciate it. And no. And I'm going to use the Boys and Girls Club as an example. We have a great STEM program, and in our town, there's no other STEM program. So these jobs, and right now, according to the Department of Commerce, 46% of the jobs coming out need a STEM degree or will help you. So we're helping our kids who are going to pay taxes and have jobs and, live normal lives for the most part, get those skills that they're not getting anywhere else. Or you can say, in the case of Boys and Girls Club, I would say I'm pretty solid middle class person. My refrigerator's always full. I've never been hungry, but I've seen at the clubs that I've worked for, a lot of instability. I've seen kids who will come up and they'll be like, "Hey, Nathan, are you going to eat that?" Because and they'll put it in their pocket. No, I'm done with it. Okay, I'm going to put it in my pocket. So they have food later on in the night, kind of thing. So you argue your points and you coach them to learn to talk from a position of strength. How are you as a nonprofit helping change the world? Well, we're feeding kids, and kids, have you seen how kids act in the morning when they're hungry? Imagine no food for 48 hours going to school. And, those are the kids, that's the bad kid. No, it's not the bad kid. It's the hungry kid. So you're saying, hey, we're doing what we're doing by feeding you at the Boys and Girls Club. And it helps you, so you have less discipline issues. It helps you because it allows parents to work longer. And again, this isn't a commercial for the Boys and Girls Club, but I'm talking about, if you can understand, you can see my analogy. You're arguing your point from strength rather than saying, if you don't donate, our lights will go off. Well, then you're a sucky business. You're not a good business person. And that doesn't help if you're trying to, what I'm saying? You see what I mean?
Yeah. So it seems like in a lot of ways, you're presenting a lot of the value that you add rather than coming across as begging.
Right.
In case someone might have a spare dime lying around.
Well, you've always heard the phrase, everybody wants to be associated with a winner.
Right.
I mean, who are you more likely to give to? I mean, that you think your money is going to be sustainable. If you said, I have $1,000 I'm going to give to, are you going to give it to the guy who goes, man, if we don't get this in, man, I don't know if we're going to have to close our doors. Well, then you're not doing a good job as on the business side. Because I always tell the other, this is really important with nonprofits. You're just a business. You have a nonprofit is all it is a business with a special tax designation. You still have to run your business well. And that's one of the other things I tell them. You got to understand that. You can't just go, well, somebody will give to me because I've got a 501c3. You know what? And I'd say that, and by the way, I'm not saying this to be a jerk because I don't mean it in that way. But I always tell some of my nonprofits who go, well, but we're helping dogs. And I go, but you're not special. And I don't mean, again, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Every day in the United States, I believe it's 286 new nonprofits open every day. So why are you special? Because the nonprofit that helps with the homeless people is pretty important. And the nonprofit that helps feed people, pretty important. And the nonprofit that helps with domestic violence, pretty important. So if I've got a pit of money and I'm going to give it to somebody as an investor, as a donor, as a foundation, I'm giving it to the person who can tell their story, who can speak their game, and who knows their business. So one of the other things when you work with business people, the for-profit world, you're talking more strategies. You're talking about techniques you can use, sometimes dealing with a crazy employee, because I've had a couple of those. They talk about my boss is stupid, this or this, those kind of things. And you get that too. With nonprofits, you're talking about how it kind of goes to that comparison we made between coaching and mentoring. You're doing a little bit more of understand who you are and how you can grow, because here's the bottom line. If you don't do a good job in your business, when we're talking about a sense of urgency and all of my doors, if you don't do a good job with your business side of things, how many people are you helping then? If I didn't do a good job at my Boys and Girls Club, all those kids, 1,400 kids a day that we jumped up to from 80, where would they go after school? What trouble would they get in? I mean, East Texas, not a lot to do. And I can promise you, we had a high teen pregnancy rate. If we didn't do our job and understand the business side of things as well, that's important too. So a lot of it is teaching with nonprofits too, is teaching them the business. And then there's so many other components. There's dealing with a board. You're the leader of the ship for a nonprofit, right? My analogy is always that the CEO is the one who steers the ship. The board serves as the engine and they keep pushing you forward, right? How do you tell if one of your board members, who are your bosses, they're your bosses, they can fire you. That's one of the responsibilities, hiring and firing of the executive director. What do you do if they're crazy? What do if they make a really dumb suggestion? Because that's happened. I've had that happen to me personally. And you're like going, no, that's not going to work. And you as the board member don't know. This is the way it works in my industry. I'm a banker. This is how it works for me. But that's not the way it works in a nonprofit. So how do you make that balance? Because like I said, you don't want to tell, you don't want to tell your board member, I mean, you wouldn't be this blunt, but that's ridiculous. You wouldn't be that blunt, but how do you really steer them away from an idea that could be catastrophic that they just don't understand? You know what I mean? It's one of those things. So there's so many different areas. I mean, because then you have your whole staff. And when you're a small club, small nonprofit, you're the trainer, you're the marketing guy, you're the grant writer. I've been the referee when we didn't have somebody show up to referee for basketball. You've got all these different components that are so different. So a lot of my coaching is when I go through a coaching thing, and tell me if I'm not getting ahead on a question there on my.
No, you're good.
Okay,
you're good.
I do one of my trainings that I do. I try to. I mean, obviously, you get your people who go in for as long as they can afford to, and as long as they feel that you're effective. You finally. I mean, I've had people where I think I've done a really good job with them, and I think they think I've done a really good job to them. But then they plateau. I mean, we then start to just become buddies. And we start talking and how's your wife and kids and what's ever going on and, those kind of things. And so sometimes you can lose your effectiveness a little bit. But my regular standard system is there's like 10 parts, specifically for nonprofits, to where we hit on dealing with the board. We get into doing the business side of things. And again, it's a little bit on the mentoring side, but they don't know any of this. Like I said, I ran a computer store before I got the boys and girls. I mean, I was city commissioner, but that was unpaid. So it wasn't like my job. And that's kind of that's where they are. You get these people who want to do a good job, but don't know how to. So you're teaching them that side of things as well when you coach them, as well as and there's the mental strain. I do a lot on coping, but let me go back, take a step back because I get excited and I get ahead of myself. But, you do the mentoring, you do the marketing, you do the fundraising, you do the grant writing, you do the board development, you do the community development, you do the volunteers, you do the business and the legal stuff, putting in your 990s. If you don't turn your 990 in, you lose your 501c3 status. So you got to do all these things. And I put all that in for them so they can understand everything that they're. And then, like I said, one of the other parts that we talk about, though, is also when we do the coaching on the nonprofit side, is the self-care, because you sometimes see the dark side of life. I always tell everybody the hardest day I ever had at the Boys and Girls Club. Now, I've since called CPS a lot of times, and I know the process and what to do for the safety of the child. But there was a kid playing basketball. He was in the gym. And he was sweaty, as you would imagine. He pulled his shirt up and he wiped his face. And when he did, I saw his back. And I was like, could you lift up your shirt again? I mean, is that okay? Would you lift up your shirt? And all that. And of course, legal stuff, cameras, all that stuff. And he said, yeah. And his back looked like a road mat. And his mom beat him with a metal fly swatter all over his back. And he had welts and everything. And I called CPS and I was like, I always joke, anybody who has kids knows that kids will drive you nuts. I've said this to my son many times. No, I'm going to, right there, kind of like the honeymooners, when Jackie Gleason goes, I'm going to knock you to the moon. I could never imagine, just a little innocent kid who might have a smart mouth, who, might have done something, broken something, and you got, that always happens. That's circumstantial. I could never imagine beating a kid with a fly. We had a kid with a outline right here of an iron on his hand because he did something wrong or came in late, and his dad burned him, took the hot iron and burned him. So all that to say is, that was just in the youth field. Imagine what somebody who works with women who've been victims of domestic violence, or, I'm a softie. If you worked at a animal shelter and there's a dog that just wasn't going to make it and you have to give it the shot, I couldn't do that. Those weigh on you. And that's one of the reasons why the turnover is so high in the nonprofit field. Well, that, and they don't pay well because they think, you work in the nonprofit, you shouldn't have a salary. No, if you're brilliant, you should have a salary. But that's beside the point. That's a whole nother podcast. We'll talk about it later. They've got to understand that that this stuff wears on you, and how do you cope with that? Some of the stuff that when I tell my client, I had a customer, one of my most favorite customers that I have, one of my most favorite coaching client customers. She's coincidentally from a Boys and Girls Club, and she had a situation where she was chewed out by a parent. The kid did something wrong, but it was one of those situations of not my kid, and screaming and F you and I hate you and I'm all these different things. And she was just crying. She's like, I don't need this. I'm going to quit. And I told her, I said, you got to take care of yourself, but also think, what's going to happen to all these kids? What's going to happen to that kid? You know, what is that kid going to be your next, serial killer kind of thing? But you don't know what's going to happen. So one of the ideas is learning how to cope, learning how to I'm a big advocate. I always tell all my coaching people who are in the nonprofit, try to work a half day on Friday. You always deserve a long weekend because you never, if I had one time when we were doing the budget, one of my board members was giving me grief about my salary, which in East Texas, it wasn't that high. It was like, I think I was getting like 65,000, but I was the highest paid person. Right. And they're like oh my gosh. And they were just kidding. They weren't being a jerk and they weren't upset. The executive director's salary of 65,000 is killing us kind of thing. And I was like, well, I'm a smart aleck. And I was like, I agree with you. But the fact that it's probably more closer to like 65 to 70 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week, it's a bargain. It's a bargain. Because if you went hourly, you'd be broke. And that's what it is. Because being on a nonprofit is a 24-hour a day job pretty much. I mean, when somebody calls you that you're needed somewhere, you go. You're here on the earth. Muhammad Ali is one of my favorite phrases. I use it a lot that Muhammad Ali always said. He said, service is the rent you pay to live on earth. That's why you get in the nonprofit field. You don't get in it to get rich. You don't get in it you're getting in it to make the world a better place. So if somebody calls you at 3 a.m. that it's a domestic violence case and I really would like you to meet me at the hospital, you throw on clothes and go. You know what I mean? So that's a whole different side of coaching on dealing with the emotions of real life, of seeing a homeless guy who has no teeth because he can't even afford a toothbrush. Those are the kinds of things. And you go, I don't know if you're religious or not or whatever, but how did God let this happen to this guy? Because I talk to him every day when he comes to the soup kitchen and he's a pretty brilliant dude. What happened? You know what I mean? It makes you rationalize things. And like I said, you go, I don't want to see this anymore. I'm going to go work at Lowe's. I'll put up lumber. That's all I want to do. Pay my bills. Done. No, it's a calling. It's a calling. And that's one of the things you got to understand. And that's what I tell all the people that I coach, even the board members too. Because like I said, different kind of thing, but it's a different thing. It's a whole different animal from being in business, because business is most often, to me at least, my opinion is it's mostly a growth mindset. It's a continuation of trying to get bigger, always get bigger. Whether it's circumstantial or not, if you have a down year, then you start stressing out and, oh my gosh, we didn't serve as many clients. We didn't sell as many dollars worth of donuts at Dunkin', whatever the reason is. And you don't process it the same way. You say, oh my gosh, but you can take into account what happened and they get worried about it. Nonprofit's not like that. It's like I said, it's just a completely different way of thinking. It's for very a special type of person. I always say that. That's always important to realize, because not anybody can. Oh, I can do that. No, you can't. It takes a while to really get used to it and really understand every facet that you have, kind of thing. So.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. That's a great answer. I appreciate that. And you have a lot of experience that shines through. And it seems like a lot of your coaching is a lot of connecting the head and the heart in a way, emphasizing the importance of the.
Did you steal I did a blog on that. Did you steal that? Did you read that?
No, I didn't. But I can see it from what you're saying. So that's really great, because a lot of it is connecting the head and the heart, showing the importance of the business aspect, but also there's more important things, or I guess equally as important things, maybe you could say, is understanding the why and understanding what it's all about. So that's fantastic. A lot of great value that you just shared there. Switching over to the coaching side a little bit more with your business, what would you say is one thing that's driving most of your growth right now in your coaching business?
I'm getting more people doing the group thing, like that class, that 10-week class that I was telling you about. I get people who that want to do like, I try to cap it out to have about 10 to 15 people per little cohort. And it works. Part of it is because in that way, it's a little less personal, as you might imagine, but the synergy created from everybody in the room that's like, oh my gosh, I had something happen like just like that. Let me tell you. So they're able to derive on a larger pool of people who, where they had much different or similar experiences, but they can, like, I've been there before. I've had, yes, I've had that ridiculous board member, or yeah, I've had that where we were this far away from our doors closing and we had to do an emergency fundraiser. And they talk about their feelings about how they got into it. All that. Now, again, when you do that's the big thing now that I'm seeing and I'm having more success with it. I like it because it's fun. We can joke around a little bit more. Because one of the things I try to do is I'm kind of irreverent. I'm kind of, I'm a goofball, all that kind of stuff. When you're doing coaching, even you want them to show your personality, because what you're seeing right now is the way I am. I talk loud. I talk a lot with my hands. I see myself doing that all the time. You have to be a little more, to me, especially probably for the first month and a half, 2 months, you got to be a little more subdued so that the person that you're coaching thinks that you're professional. Little do they know. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But it's so they feel comfortable. They want to feel like, hey, I'm paying money for this. I want something out of it. So you try to be more professional. You try to be, here's how we're helping, how I'm helping you. But in a group setting, you can be a little bit more fun. Hey, let's start off with a joke today or something like that. I've started off when I like to do card tricks. My dad taught me some card tricks when I was 6 or 7, and I've always just done them. And so I would sometimes turn my camera down and I'd do a little card trick. And was this your card? And like, oh my gosh. And so, grabs your attention. You don't do that with one-on-one. So I personally am enjoying it. Also, the group thing, because it's a group, I can charge less, so that fits people's, especially, like I told you, I was a small club, I have a small nonprofit. I can hit people, and I can help the smaller ones. Because if you say, hey, we're going to charge $200 an hour, $200 per session, $150 per session, a lot of them can't afford that, that kind of thing. So if I can say, well, I've got 10 people, let's do it for 50 a session. I can cover you. I can still give you the knowledge you need to run your nonprofit. I can still give you we can still talk about, your crazy board president or this person who's working for you or whatever. And so I can get more people in, because I think that, like any of us, this is my job. I've got to make money. I've got electricity to pay for and stuff like that. I dig that. But when you have a group way, it also still allows me to do what I really love about this job. And that's talking to other people and utilizing what I learned from Boys and Girls Club, and then what my personal experiences were and how to help them be better. Because I will be the first to tell you, not being a CEO anymore of a Boys and Girls Club, I don't miss it at all. I love that I can schedule the times. And I could do this if I go visit my family, because we're going to the East Coast for Christmas. I can still talk to my customers and still have sessions, especially now with Zoom and all that kind of stuff. I can do virtual meetings. I can do that no problem. So in that regard, I like it better. I miss the high fives from the kids. They called me, because my name's Brian, they call me Mr. B. High five, Mr. B. I miss that a lot. I miss the day-to-day interaction, especially with the kids, and hearing about, I want to show you my picture I drew in class and all those kind of things. However, I don't miss the psychosis that's involved in a day-to-day nonprofit. I get coaching still allows me to do that and still have my touch, because I like that if I'm helping an animal shelter in New York City, which I have an animal shelter in New York City, it's, even though it's not me, I'm giving the advice, I'm giving the direction, but the people who are hiring me still have to have sense and be able to execute, or it's not going to work. They're the ones doing the work. It's still nice knowing that I have my hand in animal, dogs not getting killed in New York City, or the lady in India that I was telling you about, that I have to call, that we call in an hour and a half because the time difference is insane. Those kind of things. That makes me feel good. And I've been able to deal with people with cancer groups. I've coached people on cancer with cancer, who have adrenal cancer, who are ultimately, right now, adrenal cancer is like 100% fatal. So eventually, if you get it, you're going to die. That's kind of hard, but I'm dealing with that, dealing with animals, dealing with kids, dealing with the elderly, dealing with job readiness and workforce readiness in different communities. That's what's fantastic that I like the most about doing this. But to go back to the original question, yeah, I'm getting driven a lot by the group stuff. I like the group stuff is to me is much more fun.
That's great. And I like how you structured it to where you're able to support a lot of people that may not be able to afford or fit it in the budget to handle a normal coach, especially one-on-one coaching. So you're able to make it more broad-based and maybe reach the people that aren't usually able to. So that's fantastic. They're probably the ones that oftentimes need it most too. So
yeah.
Very cool. What about if you had to pick on the flip side, one thing that's kind of your biggest challenge in your business right now, what would that be?
Consistency. Yeah, it's easy. Consistency. People will do coaching. My minimum contract now is 6 months. I wanted it, I think, really, so you can build a relationship, so I can know how you think, if I were your coach, Nathan, how you think, what you like, what you don't like, knowing some of the personal aspects of, your spouse's name, or I've got 3 kids or whatever, because like I said, you want to be friends so you can get to know about them, so you can know that you care. But a lot of times after I've done 6 months and we're seeing great growth, doing great things, the nonprofits doing, and again, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm not just because of me, but because I'm helping you open your eyes to some things, right? That oh my gosh, I never thought about that. They get to that, oh, I got it now. It's like, you don't, you don't want to be a jerk and sound, but no, you don't. You don't you scratch the surface, and we're starting to get a rhythm. But so getting consistency with people, I would love to, and I've thought about this. I talked to my wife about it. My wife's kind of like, she's not my business partner, but she's my, 27 years, my sounding board, and asked her about these things. And I was like, what if I cut it down to some crazy small number, but a commitment of 2 years? Like if we said $50 a session, but you're in for 2 years guaranteed. They don't pay me up front. They pay per session. I just bill them every month. That's the way I do it. So it's not like there's an advantage to me getting all this money in at once and all that, but something like that, because you see, and this is the reason why I started thinking about that and this is a great example from when I was a CEO of the Boys and Girls Club. I pushed really hard, and my board did it, to change the terms for the president to 2 years from 1 year. And I said, and here's the reason why. Because from the president takes over, if you're assuming your year is a calendar year, from January to April, you're still kind of learning each other. And the president is still learning the ropes and stuff like that. So by the time you get your mojo going and you get thinking, oh, we're vibing really well as president and CEO, we're in September, we have a meeting in October, there's a retreat in November, which is not any business, and then you're done. So 2 years lets you get that connection and really go together, because the most important part in a nonprofit is the CEO and the board president. Same thing when you're coaching. How much better would I do if I, knew all this stuff about you? I saw the progress, and Bill is driving me crazy. Bill's my board president. Bill's driving me crazy. And we can see the evolution of Bill getting better because we're doing these techniques. And who's going to be your next president? And how are we going to prepare so you're not in the same position next year from like Bill, you're better with, how's Sally going to be different? Whatever. And it's seeing those changes, but knowing that you have that in long term, you don't have to say, because a lot of times what I do is I have a script. Now I call it a skeleton. It's a loose skeleton, but ideally you want to hit a topic for, 90 minutes each month, keep rolling down the thing, or twice a month, I should say. And you want to keep rolling down that list of but when you have if you have a 2 year thing, if we're really getting good on ways to, who's your good board members, who are your champions, who's board members that are dead weight, and how are we going to deal with them, and who are board members with potential, but we don't know how to get it out of them. So I can coach them on how to advance their organization by making these changes with the board. And we're really talking about, there's one or two really complex board members that we really want to have potential. We really want to work. We don't have to say, 90 minutes, we're done. Next subject, we're going to talk about, nonprofit marketing. No, we just extend it out longer and we catch up. You know what I mean? So having that long-term commitment, and I think the weakness that I'm seeing or that I don't like is the short-termness of the coaching side of things. Because like I said, I think sometimes you get people who think that they know it and they're in a better position, but they can be in a way better position, if we continue with kind of like, do you ever listen to Howard Stern?
Not very much.
Okay. I'm sometimes I do, but I always know lately, especially since he's gotten away from the shock jock stuff. And he talks about, he's been going to a therapist. And when he first started, it was like, therapy is stupid. It's for weak people. I'm not a problem. I'm good. I got it. That kind of thing. And now he's religious about going, once a week, and he talks somebody to talk to. It's the same concept. It builds. You start to see the long-term effects. Obviously, very clearly, just as an analogy, Howard Stern 10 years ago is way different than Howard Stern today, kind of thing. And it's the same thing when you're working with people. You can see that development as you're going down from session to session. So they need to understand that, consistency is better. Consistency is better if I go to the gym once, you know what I mean?
Right.
Consistency is better for anything. The effects are, if it's you're doing something good, the effects are probably going to be a lot better. So that's kind of the direction that I try to push people and try to get them to do longer, because I think the impact that it'll have on them and on their nonprofit will be better.
That's great. And then going off of that and diving a little deeper into that, where do you see your business within the next 1 to 2 years compared to where it is now?
Now, I told you I'm a nonprofit consultant. So I do, like I said, I'm doing facilitating board retreats. I'm writing grants. People hire me for different things. I would like to focus a whole lot more on growing the coaching side even more, to where I don't do. Here's the thing. Listen, I'm good at grants. I don't say that in a bragging way. I've been awarded $22 million. I can write a grant like really quickly and still have a good narrative and stuff like that. It just comes naturally, kind of thing. So that's going to always be a really good fallback. Like if we ever needed extra money, if Noah decided, my son, Noah, if he decided he wanted to go to graduate school and we need to get some more money in, I could do grants and stuff like that. But I want it to really be like 75, 80% on the coaching. The other thing, and here's the interesting thing, my wife and I have decided when we retire, she's head of marketing for like a $5 billion bank, right? She's big time. I always tell everybody totally married a sugar mama. Anyway, but she's when she retires from the bank, which I don't know when that'll be, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. We've talked about going around the world and traveling. And like staying in a place. Back 5 or 6 years ago, we were doing some investigation. If you stay in an Airbnb for 6 months, you get like 15% off or something like that off the total price. So it's really affordable to live wherever you want. And of course, being married to a banker, we know how to save. We have good money for our retirement. So all that kind of, but the other part that might change depending on when she retires, we're going to pick up and go live in Sydney for 8 months. Just because I want to see the culture, and I want to see what it's like. My wife was from the bank because she did such a good job one year. She was given a cruise, a Mediterranean cruise. But we did Rome, we did the Colosseum, the Vatican, and Trevi Fountain all in a day. And because, you got to get from the port, get up there, see all the stuff, come back, done, go home, get back on the boat. And I didn't like that. Not that Rome wasn't cool, but I'd love to see how a regular day in Rome goes, not being a tourist, sit on a coffee shop and people watch. But the cool thing about it, other than the weird time differences, I can do all that stuff remotely. So I also want to build it up enough to where we still have income coming in, which, we're doing fine, but that's kind of what I'd like to do as well. And where do I see it I say 4 years. I don't want to, in case one of her bosses is watching, I don't want to I don't want to tell my sister that she's getting it. But that's what I'd like to. I'd like to see myself as 75 to 80% coaching, because right now it's closer to 50-50 ish, maybe a little more on the coaching side. But I'd like to see that, and then, like I said, I think it'd be cool just doing it, because I also think that would make me a different and better coach, because I'm seeing different perspectives of a place where I'm not the majority, and I'm not talking about like white male majority. I'm talking about knowing the language and knowing the how to navigate the city super easy, or using public transportation or anything that they do differently in other places around the world, eating the different foods and stuff. I think it'll open my eyes to different things that I could use and utilize to help the people I coach.
That's great. And I want to ask another question. And obviously you start out from a different spot when you started your coaching journey than most coaches do, because you had an experience running a full company before. So you got to experience a little bit of sales and marketing and accounting and all of the different levers that have to be pulled as the CEO running your own business.
Small business.
What's that?
Small business.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But not every coach starts out with experience in those things. And not that has to necessarily drive your answer to this question, but what is one quick tip that you give to a coach that's just starting out their coaching business?
Keep your day job. And what I mean by that is till you get a feel for what you're doing and the way that coaching goes, and because you don't just jump into it and start your own business and I suddenly have 50 customers and woo, I'm going to be able to still pay my electricity bill and my mortgage. Because again, this is your job. This is how I would always say, and the way I did it was I would do get some friends, or go to your local nonprofit and say, hey, because it looks good helping a nonprofit. Did you have not the CEO necessarily, but do you have a director of operations or something like that? Becoming a coach, I'm a certified coach, and I'll do it for you for free for 6 months. And now that's a long time. But then the idea, two parts of the idea. One is you're getting experience, because if somebody's coming to me and they say, who have you coach or what's your coaching like? Well, you're my first. Okay. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but there's that uncertainty. I mean, we all look at Google reviews, right? When 5 stars is the hotel I'm going to stay at, if I can, over the 4-star, right. So they want those reviews. So what you're doing is two things. You're building experience, you're building references, and you tell them at the end, you say, look, I'd love to get your opinion on, did I do a good job? What didn't I do well? So first of all, you're developing yourself. Second of all, you're getting reviews to where, because most people, if you're doing it for free and you're asking for help and they'll give you good reviews for the most part as well. So you're getting good reviews. Then after 6 months and 8 months, and after 6 months, you try to transition them into full-time. Okay, I'm going for real this time. I gave you the 6-month free deal. Would you like to go for another 6 months? And it's going to be X amount of dollars. So keep your day job so you can keep your bills, not stress about, oh my gosh, I have to hustle all the time to get people, because you're taking it's just a planning thing. You're taking, you decide you want to be a coach today, start 4th of July, start 7 months from now, so you can start building up everything you need to, you got to get a web page. You got to get a way for people to book you. There's a lot of stuff. It's almost like a nonprofit. There's a lot of stuff that you're not thinking about, or you don't realize that you're going to have to do. So start slowly. And then once you get to where you've got good reviews, where you've tested it out on a lot of people, you've gotten good feedback from them on how you can do better, jump in it with 2 feet and then go for it, and start getting people in. And then you say, 9 to 5 job. I'd like to say I need to retire and say goodbye. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, that's a lot of great advice and great insights that you were able to share today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime. Love doing it.
Absolutely. And thank you to our viewers. If you found this valuable, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you here next time on another episode of Grow For It. Thank you.
Later.